Hey everybody, welcome back to the PFF podcast. Today we are going to be doing another draft PFF short, and we're going to take on one of the top prospects in this draft, and that is Alabama tackle or guard Cam Robinson. I'm joined by Gordon McGuinness. Gordon, this is a great podcast because we are going to get the chance to piss off both draft Twitter and O-line Twitter at the same time. What's your take on Cam Robinson?
Cam Robinson, for me, is probably the perfect candidate when you want to weigh up the difference between production and traits. As you said there, the offensive line guys on Twitter absolutely love him because of the things you see on tape that he does very well. And if you were to give me Cam Robinson's best 50 plays of the year and you watch them, you're going to see a top 5 pick in all likelihood, because when he's at his best, he does things very well. He moves very well, gets to the second level very well. He's outstanding in pass protection. The downside is he is just nowhere near consistent enough for that to be who he is as a player. There's far too many plays where he looks a little bit lazy getting to the second level, just a little bit lazy with his hands. If you want to look at Cam Robinson as a complete player, you cannot say that he is a top 5 prospect in this draft class based on what we have seen from him. You can absolutely point to his traits, you can point to his skill set, and you can say that if you get him in the right situation, he could be a very good player, but he just is nowhere near as consistent as he really needs to be.
He's a really interesting guy because nothing about him makes any kind of sense, right down to, even his stock has been all over the place. If you go back to preseason, he was, it was the Cam Robinson sweepstakes. He was one of the guys who was going to be a top 5 pick. And, after the season, that cooled a bit. And then his stock seemed to be sliding completely. And then kind of bounced back a bit with a good combine where he tested pretty well, looked pretty fluid, moving and all that kind of thing. But I don't know that people actually have a good handle on exactly what he is, because his tape is all over the place. And, I got myself into trouble on Twitter at one point saying that he just isn't that good. And when you look at 3 years worth of tape, which is one of the kind of things that's held up as a positive in and of itself. He was a 3-year starter at Alabama, freshman through to junior, and now he's turning pro, and last season was just 1 sack. He surrendered, and that was to Derek Barnett against Tennessee. But the grading has never been there. The grading has never matched it. And whilst his numbers are pretty good in terms of pass blocking, there's a lot of plays where he does get beat, but the ball is gone, or it doesn't turn into as bad a play as it could have been. And the last 2 years also both feature double-digit penalties, which will mask some of those pressure plays.
The big concern I've got is just, I don't think you know what you're going to get from him on a play-by-play basis at this point in time. One of the comps I've seen from one of our guys had for him was Michael Orr, which I think, one, fits really well because the amount of penalties he gave up last year, there's a lot of false starts in there, some mental errors. But also the fact that, we saw Michael Orr in his first year in Baltimore almost dominate at right tackle. They moved him over to left tackle the following year. He struggled there, back to right tackle, and he struggled again. And then when he got to Carolina, actually, he had a fairly solid season the year they went to the Super Bowl. It really wouldn't shock me if the Cam Robinson we see in the NFL is a guy who is very good 1 year, struggles a little bit the next, is up and down kind of throughout his career. But when you watch him play, I can absolutely see a scenario where Cam Robinson goes to the right offensive line coach who keeps him motivated, who fixes the things that he needs to fix, gets him being more consistent, and he winds up being a top 5, top 10 left tackle in the NFL. But on the flip side, if he goes to the wrong situation, if he isn't motivated and he doesn't feel the need to go and correct these things that he definitely has to correct, and certainly improve his consistency on a play-by-play basis, he's going to get to the next level and he's probably going to flame out. I think Ben Stockwell, our lead analyst, had a take the other day, which was his ceiling's Cordy Glenn in Buffalo, a guy who's probably never going to be an elite run blocker, but has the potential to be an elite pass blocker, and his floor is Greg Robinson of formerly the St. Louis Rams. And I think that's absolutely key on the floor. And I think that's the thing. If you're the team that drafts Cam Robinson, you need to be well aware that there is a strong possibility that he could be Greg Robinson in the NFL. He might not reach the potential that he has. And the potential he has, I think, is absolutely huge. If you look at his numbers from last year, and you want to find a guy to compare him to, his pass blocking efficiency rating is very similar to Ronnie Stanley, who went in the first round for Baltimore last year, and minus one game coming off injury against Pittsburgh where he got destroyed, was really one of the better pass blockers in the NFL. So there absolutely is a scenario here where Cam Robinson is a top left tackle in the NFL, is a very good pass blocker in the NFL. It's just you're going to have to take a gamble on traits over production, and that's something that always worries me.
Yeah, it's interesting. When you turn on the tape of Cam Robinson, you can see almost immediately why people like him. He just moves extremely well. He's got this fluid ability, this incredible strength. Once he does latch onto a guy, he can move bodies almost at will. And, even this is a guy that's gone up against some really high-level pass rushers and done well against them. Like, when you look at him going up against Myles Garrett, certainly this year, he actually handled him pretty well. They didn't actually face off all that much. You're going to get the idea that an edge rusher on that side going up against a left tackle, it's going to be wall-to-wall one-on-ones all game, but it actually usually isn't. And there aren't that many instances where they're going up one-on-one against each other. But he does pretty well against them. And when, Garrett engages, Robinson's able to handle that power and that ability reasonably comfortably. I thought he struggled more against Derek Barnett against Tennessee. And even though he only gave up the one sack, he was right on the edge of having a bunch more pressure where he's desperately trying to just get Barnett around the edge and not have it become a real problem. And I think when you look at him and what he actually struggles with, the speed rush seems to be an issue. It doesn't bear out statistically. I had Ben look into this, and he actually hasn't given up that much outside speed rush pressure at all. But like I say, he's right on the edge of it a few times. And one of the interesting things about the way he tested at the combine is he had a pretty good broad jump, but a pretty terrible vertical jump. His vertical jump was under 30 inches, 27, I think, maybe. His broad jump was pretty good. And those are both supposed to be measuring explosiveness, your ability to explode out of something and move with real power and pace in a short confined area. And it's kind of weird when only one of those shows up and the other one is missing. And what I think is really interesting is when you search for a guy, obviously an offensive lineman comp for a guy who also ticks those boxes. Somebody had a pretty good broad jump and a pretty bad vertical jump. The guy that comes to mind is Chris Williams, who was also a former first-round pick, was a guy that seemed to have all the athleticism in the world coming out of Vanderbilt, played for the Bears, also then the Rams and the Bills, but he was a guy that didn't really get it done at left tackle, got moved into guard, where he also didn't really get it done, eventually found his way out of the league. But why that's interesting to me is you can kind of see at times his first kick step seems to be a little bit slow and kind of it gets exposed against a guy like Barnett who has a really quick first step. But the other interesting thing about that is that Mike Mayock has Cam Robinson as a guard. He thinks he is a guard in the NFL. I just think it's curious that now there's 2 points of reference that say guard, because you've got Mayock saying it, convinced, and it feels like Mayock wouldn't be saying that unless he'd heard it from the NFL. It's not the kind of thing he's likely to just come up with on his own. And also, that happened to Chris Williams. This was a guy that tested similar in certain areas and didn't really get it done at left tackle, got moved inside to guard.
The one worry I have if you're looking at him as a guard is that he really at no point in his career at Alabama has been a consistently good run blocker. He had a small stretch in the second half of last year where he had a couple of really dominant games. But then moving on to this year, and this is the key with Cam Robinson, is moving on to this year, everyone expected him to take that step forward, to take that to become a guy who grades as well for us as Ronnie Stanley did last year and guys like that. And he never really did. And his work in the running game is something that has always lacked consistency. He doesn't always play with the strength. And the really frustrating thing when you watch him is there are plays in there in his highlight reel, in his tape. If you watch him, there are plays where he gets to the second level and just decimates linebackers. It's far too strong for them. Just completely locks onto them. The problem is that there's also plays where he gets to the second level and frankly looks like he doesn't have a clue what he's doing. Looks like he doesn't know who he's trying to block and just can't lock onto a guy. So I'm going to keep going back to the word consistency. The biggest concern I have, and it means for the same if you move him inside to guard, are you going to get that strength on a consistent basis? Because I know from watching him on tape, he absolutely has the strength that he can push around defensive linemen. I know that he can get to the second level and handle linebackers. I just don't understand why he doesn't do it consistently enough. And it's not like it's a thing that all the Alabama offensive linemen struggled. His right tackle was a true freshman, Jonah Williams, last year, who had a great year for us. It graded far better than Robinson did and was far more consistent. So there's not really a reason on tape for me to understand why Robinson grades like he does when he shows the potential. And it's that inconsistency that terrifies me.
There are a huge number of plays where he does look lost or looks like he's doing the wrong thing, or, there's some breakdown on the offensive line in his area, and it happens a lot. It's interesting. I know there's a couple of people out there that have questions about, his mental grasp of everything. And I think one of the big tenets of PFF grading is that when we don't know, when there's some kind of breakdown, we leave it alone and everybody gets zero graded and we're not trying to guess on those things. But when you've got a guy who is at the heart of so many of those, at some point, it's probably his fault. You know what I mean? It may not be every single one of these that it's his breakdown, but there are so many plays when you watch Cam Robinson's tape where there is some kind of mental breakdown in and around his area. And at some point, he's going to have to be a part of that and going to have to develop that at the next level. And you see that again with Lyle Collins in Dallas. Again, a guy who's got all the physical tools in the world. We've seen his highlight reel of blocks is ridiculous, but there's still a whole bunch of plays where he zones the wrong way, at the snap, turns right instead of left, all that kind of stuff. And it's just beaten mentally more than he is physically. So that'd be another thing that Robinson has to overcome. But when all's said and done, I agree with you. I think this is a guy that's got the ability to be one of the better tackles in the league. But at some point, I would say I'm going to lean with the grading and say that after 3 years with no real big step forward in terms of that development, I don't know that you can expect it to happen at the next level. So I'm going to kind of assume that despite the physical traits, this is a guy that may not get it done at the next level, may not ever realize his potential.
And I think the interesting thing with him is, if I was a general manager, if I was in control of a draft room, I definitely am not taking Cam Robinson in the first round. There's too much risk there, too much risk of a bust, too much risk that he is Greg Robinson. The flip side of that is, though, this is not a strong tackle class. There are not a ton of tackles in this draft class. We saw it even in free agency. Some tackles who haven't been outstanding throughout their NFL careers getting huge deals. And I think that's reflective of how poor this tackle class is. Forrest Lamp is probably the best tackle in this class, and a lot of people view him as a guard at the next level. Pretty much everyone views him at guard at the next level. And then you've got Ryan Ramczyk from Wisconsin, who's another tackle prospect. After that, there's not a ton of talent there. So while I wouldn't take Robinson in the first round, it really would surprise me if he doesn't wind up going there overall, because with this tackle class, plus the combination of that with his traits, I think someone's going to fall in love enough with him. Someone's going to be convinced that they can get the best out of him.
Okay, that's going to do it for our roundup of Cam Robinson. Head to profootballfocus.com, sign up for Draft Pass for $19.95, I think it is. You get basically PFF signature stats for every single draft prospect that's going to be coming out. You get to see all the stuff we're talking about, all the stuff we locked away for the NFL, you can see for the incoming draft class. And obviously stay tuned to the podcast for the rest of the top guys we're going to be hitting in the PFF shorts. Tomorrow Mike and Steve will be back with the draft show, and then myself and Mike will be back next week. Hope you've enjoyed listening to this. Take it easy.